Good afternoon. My name is Tom Escol, like most of you know me. I'm from Comline Sanderson, and we're here to do training on the KSS 11-2 plunger pump. You have at your disposal 4 O&M books, right? And the books are both for the triplex pumps that are in your for thickening sludge. Is it thickening sludge pump? Yeah, and your bottom sludge drain pump, as it's called. I got a little PowerPoint that I'm going to be showing you, and I'm going to be going through some of the things in the O&M books. It's rated for a maximum of 200 gallons per minute at pin position 11, which gives you 35 RPMs a minute. It's got a Lovejoy coupling. It's got a Sumitomo reducer with a Baldor motor. Using a standard shear pin. You're using a solid core urethane 5 1/8 inch ball. You got an eccentric oiler that will come on when the pump comes on. You have a suction and discharge pressure gauge and compound gauge, and a slew of spare parts. So with the spare parts, you could probably rebuild the pump twice. That's how many spare parts you got. All right. The first part of the presentation is on some of the features and benefits of a plunger pump. Self-priming, handles high suction lift, handles estranged gases, entrained gases. Sorry. The flow rate system is head dependent. Performance curve is near vertical line. Flow rate is not sludge concentrated dependent. And we give you a little diagram on the, you can see the difference between a centrifugal pump curve versus a plunger pump curve. It's almost straight. Fixed unit volume of fluid pumped with each shaft revolution. High volumetric efficiency. With every stroke of the piston, this is a dual pistons, so with every stroke of the piston, you're going to get an even amount of sludge going through the pump. No critical tolerances to maintain. Flow rate is consistent throughout the pump life. Just a little diagram we put in here showing you the suction side versus the discharge side. The discharge side is always going to be the higher side. Easy access to valve chambers to remove obstructions. No disassembly required. Large internal clearances and high sludge concentrations. The only pump that will pump stuff at a higher concentration is that cake pump that you guys got upstairs. These will pump up to about 10%. Index pin overload release. We've got the shear pin. We're using hardened steel pins on this pump versus the old nails that they used to use. Protects against unexpected high discharge pressures. Pressure switches have to be supplied with PC double disc pumps or low pumps. We did supply pressure switches for both the suction and the discharge, but somebody made a decision here not to use them. So even though they're installed, they're not wired up. Few wear items. Yeah, the wear items are ball valves, your packing, your plungers, your valve seats, and your eccentric liners. Easy accessibility, inexpensive. This is a more or less of a flyer that's in your book that I tried to put on here. It shows you how to replace a liner. Have you done that, Bob? You have, okay. Some of the tools you'll need a Babbitt file, feeler gauge, pry bar, table vise, small straight edge, and a large adjustable wrench. I'm going to try to show you a couple key items. On a new replacement liner, you want to make sure you file, using a Babbitt file, you want to put a slight tapered edge on the edge of the liners, so you don't get no rough spots on it. So when you install the liner, you're not scarring the flange.
Using fiber liners?
Pardon?
We used to use the fiber ones years ago.
Yeah, these are not. These are aluminum. So you want to make sure you file it, right? Using a pry bar, you can rotate the pump shaft until the plunger is at its bottom of the stroke. Loosen bolt of the connecting rod cap bolts and let the plunger rest in the pump body, removing the shims. These are your shims. So you have to remove the bolt completely because one of the shims that come with the kit is solid, has a hole, it's not slotted. So you have to remove the bolts completely to get the shims out. When you get a replacement kit, you're going to get the following shim kits. You're going to get 3 of the 20,000s, 3 5,000s, 3 2,000s, and 1 solid shim at 63,000s. And you're always going to use, put the solid shim in first, and then adjust the shims in there until you maintain between a 4 and 7,000 gap between the liner. Over to the right, you can see the photo where they're using a feeler gauge at the bottom of the stroke. You want to try to maintain a 4 to 7 thousandths in using those shims. As the liner wears, you're going to have to remove some of these shims to maintain that. And how you can tell, you'll start hearing that slap, you'll hear a slapping sound, and that'd be a good indication you have to start removing some of the shims. And you could use your straight edge and get a measurement right on it. Maintenance overview of the plunger pump. Daily preventive maintenance. 3 key things you want to do when you're checking out this pump. Look, listen, and feel. With any piece of equipment that's moving, you always want to look at it first. See if there's any vibration, anything going on with it. Listen. The pump should sound the same whenever you're by it. If it sounds different, there's something going on. And then feel it. Feel it for heat. If you're building up heat, then you got problems, right? So look, listen, and feel. Again, we put this photo in here of the suction and discharge. Daily preventive maintenance. Things you should be doing daily when you're running this pump. Check the oil level around the plunger. Until a rate of oil is established, check the level in the Eccentric Oiler hourly. Once you fill that oiler up and you get oil going, you should be doing around 4 to 5 drops per minute. But you want to make sure that line is completely full of oil. Right? If there's any air bubbles in there, you want to get those out. Right? When the rate is known, you can check at least once a shift. But if you're going to be running this pump, how often, Bob, do you think?
Once a year.
Really? Even with the new change?
Who knows?
Even with the new
We'll
change?
see.
Once a year. Right. You do, if you're only going to run it once a year.
You're going to switch tabs that infrequently?
I don't know.
It's up to the bosses.
I mean, we'll use it as a drain pump most likely, but other than that.
Right. If you're only going to run it once a year, you should periodically roll it over for at least a little while. Because everything will start setting up on you. Check the packing. On your packing, you have 3 rings of chevron packing at the bottom, and then 5 rings of half-inch graphite. Check the condition of the shear pin. If you look at the opening where the shear pin comes through, and it looks kind of bent, you should be changing it. Check the air chambers for liquid. What I tell people is to take a piece of metal, tap on the chambers. They should sound hollow. When we go down there, we'll give it the tap test, and you can see. If it sounds solid, that means it's got an air leak and sludge is getting into the chambers. You should drain the chambers, right? Check the gear reducer. On your gear reducer, you have a sight glass that's made out of plastic, and there's 2 tie wraps that tell you where the oil level should be. Be very cautious on some of these sight glasses like that. The oil will leave a mark and it'll give you a false reading. What I tell people to do on the opposite side of the reducer, there's a plug, which is the same level. Take out the plug. If you get oil out, you're good. Don't get complacent with that, especially if you're only using that thing once a year. Right? Weekly preventive maintenance. Check the oil level inside the plunger and the wrist pin lubrication. The oil level in that plunger should only be half the height of the wrist pin. If it's any higher than that, you should be sucking it out. I've seen some pistons where the pistons were completely full of oil. Or water. And if it's filled with oil and water, you're floating the oil, you're not lubricating the wrist pin. That's even worse. Right? The other disadvantage when the piston gets full of oil or water mixed or whatever's in there, you're going to draw higher amps, right? And that's not good for the motor, right? So that should be really concentrate on checking on that. Check the keys in the drive flange. Check the condition of the eccentric liner. Again, if you hear that slapping sound, you know that's the liner being slapped around. The gap is too big, right? Check the main shaft. Check the oil level in the gear reducer. Monthly preventive maintenance. Check the valve balls and seats. Right now, your new valve balls are 5 1/8. When they get down to 4 3/4 inch, they need to be replaced. If you don't replace them, chances are they'll get sucked into the system somewhere, and they'll be lost forever. Well, you'll eventually find them, so they'll come someplace where you don't want them to be.
What's the best way to check that? Is it just drill a hole a certain size and see if it fits through, or?
Some people do that. Some people have a little setup where they put the ball in there. If it drops through, they know it's too small. Yep. Some people use feeler gauges. Not feeler gauges, but calipers.
So what's the limit, the minimum?
4 3/4. Check the coupling between the motor and the reducer. On the duplex, you have a Lovejoy coupling. On the triplex, which we'll be training some other time, you have a Faulkner coupling, which is a lot more intense, a little more maintenance. Check the plunger inside the wall wear for sidewall wear. Replace the oil inside the plunger. Check the wrist pin condition. Check the set screws in the drive flange for tightness. Inspect the motor reducer seals for leakage. Quarterly maintenance. Change the reducer oil. Whatever the manufacturer recommends, Sumitomo recommends, that's what oil you should use. Inside the book, there is a chart they give you. Grease the motor bearings. Again, whatever Baldor recommends, that's what you should be doing. Grease the main shaft bearings. You could use a Shell Albania EP2 or an equal on the shaft bearings. Lubricant recommendations give you the part, the point, the lubrication interval. The plunger, the surface, you want to use the Agma 5 EP. You want it daily. You don't want that plunger to be running dry, right? Some plants now have gone to a water lubricant system where they run a water line up to the pump and they reduce it down to, they put a solenoid valve in there with a little needle valve with tubing that goes right down into near the piston. And they, whenever the piston pump is started, the solenoid opens up and that little bit of water goes around the piston. You got the drain coming out of the piston, goes down onto the floor to a floor drain. And the pumps run extremely clean. You don't have that oil mess. That's what some of the plants are going through now. If not, you want to make sure there's a little oil can down there where the operator or who's ever in charge could squirt a little bit of oil around the piston. The Eccentric Oiler, Agma 5, 4 to 5 drops per minute. Again, you want to make sure that tubing is full of oil. If you got any air pockets in here, open up the little needle valve, fill a tube up with oil, then reset the drops. The wrist pin inside the plunger, again, you want to check that daily. If it's over half the height of the wrist pin,